He invited his poor ex-wife to shame her. She arrived with a Billionaire, Limousine, and Triplets. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning, printed on heavy cream paper that cost more per sheet than Lena Marsh's groceries for the week. She was standing at her kitchen counter when she opened it, still in the oversized sweater she wore on mornings when the radiator took its time, with a cup of tea going cold beside the stack of invoices she had been avoiding since Sunday. The kitchen was small, and the window above the sink looked directly into the brick wall of the Bow building next door, which let in a particular quality of gray light that she had come to think of as honest rather than depressing. The envelope had no return address, just her name, Lena Marsh, her old name, the name she had gone back to the morning after the divorce was final, because carrying his name any longer felt like wearing a coat that had never been meant for her. She read the card inside. You are cordially invited to celebrate the engagement of Derek Holt and Serena Voss Saturday, the 14th of September, the Grand Meridian Hotel, Park Avenue cocktails at 7, dinner at 8, black tie. She set it on the counter. She picked it up and read it again. Derek Holt, her ex-husband, the man who had sat across from her in a divorce attorney's office 4 years ago and said, with the particular cruelty of someone who has decided that honesty is the same thing as a weapon, that she had never quite been what he needed, that she had been fine, that fine was the problem. Fine. She had been 29 years old and 8 months pregnant, and she had sat very still in that office and listened to him say it, and she had not cried, which was the thing she was most proud of from that entire period of her life. She looked at the invitation again. Black tie, Park Avenue, Serena Voss, whose name she recognized from the society pages that sometimes appeared in her news feed because the algorithm had decided, years ago, that she was interested in that world and had never been corrected. She thought about why Derek Holt would send this to her. She knew why. She knew immediately, with the precision of someone who had been married to a man for 5 years and had learned, too late, to read his motivations clearly. He wanted to see her in that ballroom. He wanted to see her arrive alone and uncomfortable, in a dress that wasn't quite right, and he wanted to look across the room at her and feel, in the way that small men feel things, confirmed. She thought about not going. She thought about it for approximately 45 seconds. Then she picked up her phone and called Dominic. The phone rang twice. "Lena," said the voice on the other end, low, unhurried, with the particular quality of a man who has learned that most things resolve better when you don't rush them. "I need a favor," she said. "Name it." "Saturday evening, black tie, Park Avenue." She looked at the invitation, and "I need the car." A pause that contained, she knew, a smile she couldn't see. "Done," Dominic said. "What time?" 7. "I'll be there at 6:45. She put the phone down. She picked up her tea, which was cold now, and drank it anyway, standing at the kitchen window with the brick wall and the gray light, and she thought about what Derek Holt's face was going to look like when the limousine pulled up. Pause. She almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "Before we go any further, how are you feeling right now? If Lena's story already has you, take a second and hit that subscribe button. Smash the like. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. It means more than you know. Now let's get back to what happens when Lena Marsh walks into that ballroom, and what Derek Holt discovers he actually invited. 5 years earlier, Lena had been 24 years old, newly hired as a junior events coordinator at a mid-sized hospitality group in Manhattan, and operating on the precise edge of making it work. She had grown up in New Jersey, in a household that was warm and honest and functionally short of money in the specific way that produces either bitterness or resourcefulness, depending on the person. Lena had become resourceful. She had worked her way through a hospitality management degree, had built a portfolio on borrowed opportunities and long hours, and had arrived in Manhattan at 23, with a second-hand blazer and the absolute certainty that she was going to build something. She had met Derek at a corporate event she was coordinating. He was 32, managing director of a financial consulting firm that had hired the venue. He had dark hair and a very good suit and the confident ease of a man who has always occupied rooms that were designed to make him comfortable. He had walked over to the coordination table while she was troubleshooting a seating arrangement and said, with the openness that she would later understand was his best practiced quality, that she was the only person in the room who actually seemed to know what was happening. She had been flattered. She had been 24 and working hard and a little lonely, and he had paid attention to her in the particular way of a man who wants to be watched paying attention, which she had not yet learned to distinguish from the real thing. They had dated for 8 months. They had married quickly, his idea, his timeline, and she had agreed because she was in love, and because she believed the things people tell you when they are at their best and trying to deserve you. The first time she understood something was wrong, she was 26, and they had been married for a year. He had been at a dinner she wasn't invited to, his work colleagues, a new account. She hadn't minded. She had been finishing a project from home. He had come back at 11:30 and looked at her on the couch with her laptop and her notes, and he had said, in a tone she had not heard from him before, "Do you ever think about what this looks like?" She had looked up. "What does it look like? You working all the time. Here, like this." She had looked at her laptop. She had looked at him. "I'm working," she said. "I thought that was something we both did." He had gone to bed without answering. The second time, she was 27, and she had been promoted to senior coordinator, and she had come home with flowers she had bought herself because it was a good day, and she was happy. He had looked at the flowers and then at her and said that she seemed to enjoy her job more than their life, which was interesting, said as an observation rather than a complaint. She had stood in the kitchen with the flowers, and she had thought, for the first time clearly, that something here was not fixable. That the problem was not what she did, or how much she worked, or whether the flowers were the right ones. The problem was that Derek Holt had married an image of her that he had constructed in his own mind during those 8 months, and when she turned out to be an actual person with an actual life and actual ambitions, the image and the person had begun to separate, and he had chosen the image. By the time she was 28 and pregnant, she already knew. She had found out on a Thursday morning in February, standing in a bathroom that was very clean because she had always done the cleaning, and she had held the test, and she had felt 2 things simultaneously: an enormous, uncomplicated joy, and a very clear understanding that she was going to be doing this alone. She had told Derek that evening. He had nodded. He had said the word "okay" 4 times, in slightly different tones. He had gone to his study and closed the door. While Lena spent the following months building the logistical architecture of a life that was about to expand in ways she was entirely unprepared for, researching strollers and childcare, costs and maternity leave policies, and whether her apartment could fit a crib, Derek Holt was already meeting Serena Voss at the kind of events that required the kind of tie he had started, buying after the wedding, because he had decided his life required upgrading. While Lena sat in prenatal appointments and answered no to the question about emergency contacts, Derek was being photographed at gallery openings and charity dinners with a woman whose family had a summer house in the Hamptons and a year-round presence in the columns that covered people who considered their own lives a form of public art. Also, while Lena delivered her 3 children, the doctors said twins, and then, 40 seconds later, there was a third, in a hospital on a Wednesday night in October with her mother gripping her hand on one side and her best friend Priya on the other. Derek Holt was in Aspen. She had named them herself. Ava, the first, then Noah, then Cleo, who arrived as a surprise and had apparently decided from the very beginning that she was not going to do things the expected way. They were 3 years old now, and they were, in Lena's honest and completely unbiased assessment, the most extraordinary people she had ever met. The year after the divorce had been the hardest year of Lena's life. This was a fact she held without self-pity, the way she held most facts, looking directly at it, understanding its shape, and deciding what to do next. She had returned to work 8 weeks after the triplets were born because she had no other option. She had a mortgage she had taken out in her own name before the marriage, when she had believed very firmly in building things with your own money, and she had a child care cost that was staggering, and a divorce settlement that was correct by the letter of the law and insulting in the spirit of it. Derek had not contested the divorce. He had also not offered anything beyond what his lawyer calculated as minimally defensible. He had been, in the end, precisely what he had been throughout, a man who did the required minimum and called it generosity. She had moved her mother into the apartment for 6 months, because 4 people cannot be managed alone, which her mother had done with the love and exhaustion of a woman who had not planned for a second family in her 70s, but had arrived with her coat and her organizational instincts, and her very specific views on infant sleep schedules. She had worked. She had eaten cold food over a sink more times than she could count. She had attended school information evenings alone, and pediatric checkups alone, and birthday parties alone, and she had smiled at people who asked where the father was, and said, "Not in the picture," with the precise tone that closes that conversation. And she had built something. She had left the hospitality group 2 years ago and started her own events company with Priya, who had been her friend since they were both junior coordinators and who had the commercial instincts that Lena's creative ability needed to become a business rather than a practice. They had named it Elevation Events. In 26 months they had gone from 2 people and a kitchen table to an office in Midtown, and 11 clients and a staff of 7. 3 months ago, a man named Dominic Reyes had walked through the door. He was the founder of Reyes Capital, which Priya had communicated to Lena with the expression of someone trying not to visibly vibrate. He was 39, quietly built, with the unhurried attention of a man who had been in enough rooms to know which ones were worth his time. He had come to inquire about planning the Reyes Foundation annual gala, which was the kind of event that required serious organizational intelligence, and which most established firms had pitched for without success. He had sat across from Lena and asked her 3 questions that were so precisely the right questions that she had stopped pretending to be professionally composed and simply started talking about the work. The meeting lasted 2 hours. He had called the next morning. He had called, she would later understand, because of the work, because she had said things in that meeting that no one else who had pitched the gala had said, because she saw events the way architects see buildings, as experiences with structure and logic underneath the beauty. But also, she thought now, because something had happened in that meeting that she had not expected and was still getting used to. He had looked at her, not at the presentation, not at the proposal, at her, with the direct, unhurried attention of someone who finds the person in front of them worth looking at. She had not been looked at like that in a long time. They had met 4 more times over the following months, always professionally, always about the gala, always running slightly longer than the agenda required. He had told her about the foundation's origins, his mother's name on the scholarship program, the community health clinic in South Bronx his family had funded for 15 years. He had asked about the triplets with the genuine interest of a man who is not performing interest in children to seem approachable, but who actually wants to know. She had told him about the night Cleo arrived as the unexpected third. He had laughed, a real laugh, surprised out of him, and said that Cleo had clearly been making her priorities clear from the very beginning. She had thought about that laugh for 3 days afterward. She was still thinking about it when the invitation arrived. The mystery engine activated on a Wednesday afternoon, 3 weeks before the engagement party. Lena was in the Elevation Events office, reviewing the Reyes Foundation gala logistics, when Priya appeared in the doorway, with the expression she wore when she was carrying information she was not sure how to deliver. "I need to show you something," Priya said. She set a folder on the desk. It was a printout of a property filing, a commercial real estate transaction, public record, processed through the Manhattan County Clerk's office 6 weeks ago. Lena looked at it. The property was a building on West 46th Street, a mid-sized office building, 12 floors, currently occupied by a mix of small businesses and non-profit organizations. The buyer was listed as an LLC, Holt Meridian Holdings, Derek's LLC. The tenants listed on the lower floors included, on the 4th floor, Suite 412, Rishan Events LLC. Lena looked up. "He bought our building," Priya said. Pause. Lena looked back at the filing. She read it twice. "When did this close?" she said. 6 weeks ago. We're still under our current lease for 11 more months." Priya sat down. "Our lease has a standard renewal option, but the new owner can restructure terms at renewal." She paused. "If he doubles the rate, we can't stay." Lena set the filing on her desk. She thought about the timing. 6 weeks ago was 3 weeks before the engagement party invitation arrived. She thought about why Derek Holt would buy a building quietly, without announcement, without any contact with the tenants. She thought about the invitation on cream paper and the words fine and not quite what he needed. She thought about a man who does the minimum and calls it generosity. "He knows we're here," she said. "He has to," Priya said. "The due diligence on any building purchase includes the tenant list. He bought it knowing we were on the 4th floor." "Yes." Lena picked up her pen. She set it down. She picked it up again. All right, she said. All right what? All right, I need to understand the full shape of this before Saturday. She picked up the phone and called her lawyer. Her lawyer was a woman named Sandra Osei, who had handled the divorce 4 years ago with the specific competence of someone who has seen exactly this kind of man before and has organized her entire professional life around making sure he doesn't win. Sandra listened to the building filing situation in the way she listened to everything, completely, without interruption, already thinking 3 steps ahead. He can't break your current lease, Sandra said, but he can make renewal impossible. And if he's planning to do that, he'll have structured it already. Can I find out what he's planning before renewal? We can file a discovery request if there's a legal action, but we'd need grounds. What if there are financial irregularities in the building purchase? A pause. What kind of irregularities? I don't know yet, Lena said. I'm going to find out. Ali #1 arrived in the form of Marcus Webb, who was Priya's husband's college roommate and who was also a commercial real estate attorney with a particular specialty in predatory crime acquisition practices, which he described as the fastest-growing subspecialty in New York real estate law, and which Lena believed. He came to the Elevation Events office on a Thursday afternoon and sat at the conference table and looked at the building filing with the practiced eye of a man who reads these documents the way other people read menus, quickly, and knowing immediately what to order. Holt Meridian Holdings, he said. My ex-husband's company. He looked at her briefly. Okay. He turned back to the filing. Who did he buy from? A group called Sentinel Property Partners. Marcus looked up. Sentinel. He said it in the particular tone of someone encountering a familiar name in an unexpected context. You know them? I know of them. They've appeared in 3 other acquisition chains in the past 2 years. He turned a page. All 3 of those chains ended with small business tenants facing non-renewal terms they couldn't sustain. He looked at her steadily. This is a pattern, Miss Marsh. Sentinel identifies buildings with established small tenants, usually businesses that are growing, but not yet capitalized enough to own their space. They sell to secondary buyers who restructure the lease terms. The tenants leave. The space gets repositioned upmarket. Lena absorbed this. How many tenants in our building? 9 on the lower floors. 7 of them, small businesses or nonprofits. With leases expiring in the next 18 months? Marcus checked the filing. 7 of the 9. Pause. The conference room was very quiet. I need the full picture, Lena said. Not just our lease. All of it. That's going to require a deeper look at Sentinel's filing history. It's public record, but it's not simple. I'm not looking for simple, she said. I'm looking for what's true. Marcus nodded once. Give me a week. While Marcus worked through Sentinel's filing history, 23 transactions across 4 boroughs over 6 years, each one following the same structural pattern, Dominic Reyes called on a Friday evening to discuss a central logistics question that Lena was reasonably certain could have been an email. She answered anyway. They talked about the gala for 12 minutes. Then he said, "How are you?" And the way he said it was the way you say something when you want the real answer. She told him about the building. Not all of it, the personal dimension, Derek's involvement, the timing. She kept it professional. She told him there was a potential lease situation she was navigating, and that she had good counsel on it. He was quiet for a moment. What building? He said. She gave him the address. Another pause, different from the first. I know that building, he said. It was on our list 2 years ago. We looked at it for foundation office space. You didn't buy it? The seller at the time was asking for a price that made no sense for the condition. We passed. He paused. Who sold it to your ex-husband's company? A group called Sentinel Property Partners. And the silence this time had a quality she recognized. The quality of someone connecting something. Dominic, she said. I know Sentinel, he said. Not well, but I know their pattern, and I know the man who runs them. A pause. His name is Gerald Voss. Lena went very still. Voss, she said. Serena Voss's father, Dominic said. Yes. It arrived the way these things always do, not in a single revelation, but in the accumulation of pieces that assemble themselves, one by one, into a picture you couldn't see until they were all in place. Ally #2 was Gerald Voss's former business partner, a man named Paul Drummond, who had split from Sentinel Property Partners 3 years ago, in circumstances that were not amicable, and who was now in the business of telling his story to anyone who would listen with a legal purpose in mind. Marcus had found him through the discovery process, in the footnotes of a litigation filing from the Sentinel-Drummond split. Paul Drummond came to Sandra Osei's office on a Tuesday afternoon and sat down with the careful posture of a man who has been waiting for exactly this meeting. He had records, internal Sentinel documents from the years he had been a partner, records of tenant lists, lease expiry timelines, secondary buyer arrangements, a pattern that had been, when he was inside it, explained to him as aggressive but legal property development, and which he had eventually understood to be something structured and deliberate and unkind. Also, he had emails. 3 emails between Gerald Voss and a buyer coordinator regarding the West 46th Street building. The relevant one was dated 4 months ago, 2 months before the sale to Holt Meridian Holdings had closed. It said, "Tenant on floor 4 is ex-wife. Holt wants the building. Make it happen. She won't renew." Sandra read it aloud. Pause. The office was very still. Lena looked at the email on the table in front of her. She looked at the 7 words in the middle of it. She won't renew. She had known, from the moment the invitation arrived, that this was about more than an engagement party. She had known it in the way you know things about people you were once closest to, not because they tell you, but because you have learned the shape of how they think. But seeing it written down was different. There is a difference between understanding that someone wishes you harm and reading it in their own words. She picked up the document. "Can we use this?" she said. "Yes," Sandra said. "What does it get us?" "It gets you grounds for a tortious interference action. It also gives any other tenant in that building grounds to contest non-renewal terms. And it gives the Manhattan DA's office something to look at regarding whether this constitutes a pattern of targeted predatory practice." Sandra looked at her. "Lena, this isn't just about your lease. If Drummond's records show what I think they show, there are businesses and non-profits in 7 buildings across the city who have been affected by this pattern." Lena looked at the email. She thought about the 7 tenants on the lower floors of her building, the non-profit on the 2nd floor, a job training program. She had seen the sign every morning for 2 years, the small architecture firm on the 3rd, the tutoring center on the 5th, with the hand-painted sign, and the children who came and went after school on weekdays. She thought about Fine. She thought about not quite what he needed. She set the document down. "All right," she said. "Let's build the full case. Every building, every tenant, everything Drummond has." She paused. "But I still want to go to that party on Saturday." Sandra looked at her. "Oh, I wouldn't miss it for anything," Sandra said. And she smiled, which was the first time Lena had seen her smile in 4 years of professional relationship. Ally #3 appeared at the office the following morning in the form of Eleanor Reyes. Eleanor was Dominic's aunt, his mother's older sister, 73 years old, with silver hair and the manner of a woman who has built 3 companies and outlasted everyone who told her she couldn't. She had run the Reyes Foundation since its founding, and she arrived at Elevation events with a car service and no appointment and the expression of a woman who considers calling ahead an optional courtesy. She looked at Lena's office. She looked at the mood board for the gala. She looked at Lena. "My nephew tells me you have a situation," she said. "Your nephew talks to you about client situations?" "He talks to me about things that matter to him," Eleanor said, sitting down. "You appear to be a thing that matters to him. I thought I should see for myself." Lena looked at her steadily. "And?" she said. "And you are exactly who I thought you'd be," Eleanor said, "which is to say, someone who built a company with her own hands while raising 3 children alone, and who is currently trying to decide how much of the fight she should show and how much to keep quiet." Pause. Lena sat back. "Show it all," Eleanor said. "In my experience, women who keep the fight quiet do so out of habit, not wisdom. The habit was necessary once. It isn't anymore." She stayed for an hour. She talked about the Reyes Foundation's own history with predatory lease practices in the South Bronx in the early years. She talked about what Eleanor had done, which was to make the pattern public, loudly and with documentation, in a way that left the other party no comfortable place to retreat to. "Sunlight," Eleanor said when she left. "That's all it ever is. You shine a light on it, and suddenly the thing that was designed to work in the dark stops working." That evening, Dominic came to the office. He did not call first. He knocked on the open doorframe of her office at 6:15, when the rest of the staff had gone, and he was in a jacket without a tie, and he looked, she thought, like a man who has been thinking about something all day. "I know what my aunt said to you," he said. "How?" "Because she told me she was coming, and I know her." He came in. He sat down across from her. "I want to say something that is not about the gala or the building or the case Sandra is building." She looked at him. "I have been trying for 3 months," he said, "to find the appropriate professional moment to say it. And I have concluded that there is no appropriate professional moment, which means I am going to say it unprofessionally and simply hope that you'd understand what I mean." "Go ahead," she said. "I think about you," he said. "Not in a complicated way, in the way that means I'd like to know how you are at the end of a day, and not as a professional courtesy. I think about what you've built and what it cost you to build it, and I think," he paused, "I think you are one of the most substantial people I have met, and I have been in enough rooms to know what that means, and what it doesn't mean." Pause. The office was quiet. Outside the window the city ran its evening shift. Lena looked at him. "Dominic," she said. "Yes. I have 3 triplets who will want to know everything about you within approximately 4.5 minutes of meeting you. One of them will try to interview you. One of them will try to negotiate something. The third will simply watch you until she has decided what she thinks, and then she will tell you directly, and you should know in advance that she is never wrong." He looked at her. "I would like to meet them," he said. She looked at him for a moment. The unhurried quality of him, the steadiness, the man who had listened for 3 months and asked the right questions and shown up at the right door, at the right time, with no agenda except the honest one. "Saturday," she said. "There is an engagement party on Park Avenue. I was going to bring you as a favor, but I think I'd like you to come because you want to." "I want to," he said. "Then Saturday," she said. "But first," she opened her desk drawer. She pulled out a folder. "I need to show you the Sentinel files, because what Gerald Voss has been doing in this city affects more people than me, and you know real estate, and I want to make sure I understand everything before we walk into that room." He pulled his chair forward. They worked for 2 hours. She showed him every document. He asked precise questions. He knew 2 of the 7 affected buildings, and knew things about their tenant histories that filled in gaps in the pattern. When they had gone through everything, he sat back and looked at the picture that had assembled itself across her desk. "This is enough," he said. "For the legal case, yes. Sandra agrees. It's also a story," he said. "The kind that doesn't stay inside a courtroom." She looked at him. "That's what Eleanor meant," she said. "Yes," he said. "Sunlight." She looked at the documents. She thought about 7 buildings. She thought about the non-profit on the 2nd floor and the tutoring center on the 5th. She thought about the words "she won't renew." "After Saturday," she said, "all of it goes public." He nodded. She began gathering the files. Her hand moved across the desk and his was already there, not reaching for her, just present, resting on the edge of the desk in the way of a man who does not perform proximity but allows it. She looked at his hand. She looked at him. She turned her hand over. He looked at it for a moment. Then he covered it with his. Pause. Outside the window, the city did what it always did. And inside the office, something that had been building for 3 months arrived, quietly, at the place it had been going. The crisis came on Friday morning, the day before the party. It came in the form of a phone call from Priya, who was already at the office, whose voice had the flat, controlled quality of someone who has received bad news and is deciding how to frame it. "Derek's lawyer called Sandra," Priya said. "He's moving up the lease restructuring notification. He's filing it today instead of at renewal." Lena sat up in bed. "He's not supposed to be able to do that within the current lease term. He says he found a clause. Something about change of business operations. Sandra is looking at it. Is it real? Sandra says it's a stretch, but it would take 30 days to contest, and he knows that." Priya paused. "Lena, I think he found out about Drummond." Pause. She sat at the edge of the bed and held the phone and looked at the wall of her bedroom, which had a photograph of the triplets on it from last Christmas. Ava, with her arms folded, because the photographer had asked her to pose, Noah grinning, because Noah was always grinning, Cleo, looking directly at the camera with the expression of someone who has already decided what she thinks and finds the rest of the proceedings mildly amusing. She looked at Cleo's face for a moment. "He's scared," Lena said. "Yes," Priya said. "Good," Lena said. "Call Sandra. Tell her I want the full Sentinel filing ready to go to the DA's." office, and the business press by Monday morning. We were going to wait until after the weekend, but we're not waiting anymore. Monday? Monday. And tell Sandra I want everything sent to the 7 other affected tenant groups before it goes anywhere else. They deserve to know first. Okay. A pause. Are you still going tomorrow night? Lena looked at the triplets on the wall. More than ever, she said. A letter arrived at her apartment that afternoon. Not from Sandra, not from Marcus or Drummond, from Dominic. Handwritten, 4 pages, in the clear and slightly formal hand of a man who thinks in complete sentences. She made coffee. She read it at the kitchen table. He had written about the Reyes Foundation building in the South Bronx, the one they'd funded for 15 years, the community health clinic. He wrote about the lease crisis they'd had in the foundation's second year, when a predatory landlord had tried the same restructuring move, and what Eleanor had done about it. She had called every board member, every community partner, every press contact she had built over 30 years, and she had made the story public before the landlord could move. The landlord had backed down in 8 days. Then he wrote this: I want to be honest with you about something I have been less than clear about, because you deserve clarity more than you deserve composure from me. What I feel when I am with you is not professional admiration, though that is real and large. It is the specific thing that happens when you find someone who is trying to build the same world you are trying to build, and you realize you have been building it alone because you didn't just know there was another person who wanted the same thing. I would have told you this 2 months ago if I had been braver. I would have told you the first time you talked about what Elevation Events was for, not just what it did, but what it was for. And I understood in about 40 seconds that you were serious about things in the way I try to be serious about things. I would have said it even if you had turned me down, even if the gala had fallen through, even if none of this, the building, the Sentinel situation, Saturday night, had given me any practical reason to be in your life. I would still be here. I would still have found a reason. She read that paragraph twice. Then again. She sat at the kitchen table for a long time. Then she picked up her phone and sent him one message. It said, I'll see you at 6:45. His reply came in under a minute. I'll be early. She put the phone down. She thought about the man who had come to her office and asked 3 right questions and then kept asking them month after month until she had stopped being surprised by how right they were. She thought about tomorrow night. She thought about Derek Holt's face. She finished her coffee. She went to check on the triplets. Saturday arrived with the specific quality of September in New York, still warm but with the first suggestion of change underneath it, the kind of day that feels like a threshold. The limousine arrived at 6:42. Dominic was already there. He was standing on the sidewalk in front of her building in a black tie that had clearly been tied correctly the first time, with the unhurried ease of a man who has attended many formal events and stopped finding them intimidating somewhere around the third one. He had flowers, 3 small bunches, one for each of the triplets, which she had not expected, and which told her something that she filed away carefully. Ava accepted hers with the solemn courtesy of a child receiving a state gift. Noah immediately tried to put his behind his ear, which Dominic assisted with without missing a beat. Cleo held hers and looked at Dominic for a long moment. Then she said, Are you taking our mom to a party? I am, he said. Is she going to win? Pause. Dominic looked at Lena. Lena looked at Cleo. Yes, Dominic said. She's going to win. Cleo considered this. Then she nodded and went back inside. Lena's mother was watching the triplets. She had come with her coat and her organizational instincts and, on this occasion, a very specific smile that she deployed when she had an opinion she had decided not to express because the situation was already proceeding correctly without it. The limousine moved through Manhattan, and Lena sat in it and looked at the city through the window and did not feel nervous, which surprised her slightly. She felt clear. She felt the particular clarity of someone who has done the work and understood the situation, and arrived at the point where all that is left is to walk into the room. Dominic was beside her. He did not fill the silence. He was simply present in it, which was what she needed. He'll see the car first, she said. Yes, and then us. Yes. She looked at the city. He sent that invitation because he wanted to see me diminished. I know, Dominic said. He miscalculated. The Grand Meridian Hotel rose above Park Avenue with the magnificent indifference of a building that has seen everything and considered most of it ordinary. The entrance had a red carpet, not metaphorically, An actual red carpet, because Serena Voss had a mother who had always believed that the occasion should be announced from a distance. The limousine pulled up. A door attendant opened the car door. Lena stepped out. She was wearing dark burgundy, which she had chosen because it was not a color that asked for permission. Her hair was up. She was not wearing Derek's ring. She had returned it 4 years ago, but she was wearing a pair of earrings that had been her grandmother's, small and gold and without apology. She looked the way she always looked when she was doing something she had fully decided to do. Dominic came out behind her and stood at her side. She felt the moment the people near the entrance understood who he was. It moved through the small cluster of guests like a quiet current. Reyes. That was what it sounded like. She caught it from 2 directions. She walked through the doors without hurrying. The ballroom was arranged with the considered opulence of someone who has been given a large budget and very specific taste. Round tables, white linens, flowers that had been flown in. A band was playing something that required the room to be too beautiful to notice it. Derek was across the room with a glass in his hand when he saw her. She watched it happen from 40 feet away. She watched him see the dress first, then Dominic. Then, a beat later, the specific beat of a man recalculating, he understood who Dominic was. His face did the thing it had always done when reality disagreed with his expectations. It went very still, in a way that was not calm. Beside him, a woman who had to be Serena Voss turned to follow his eyeline and saw Lena looking at her with the steady, direct gaze of someone who has nothing to hide and has decided that tonight, the room belongs to her. At the table assigned to Lena, she had been seated far back, near the kitchen entrance, which told her everything she needed to know about what had been arranged. She sat down and set her evening bag on the table and looked at the room. Gerald Voss was at the head table. She had not seen his face before. He was in his mid-60s, silver-haired, the look of a man who has made a great deal of money, doing things he has never had to explain in public. He was talking to a couple beside him with the comfortable ease of a man who does not know that the floor has already begun to shift. She let the cocktail hour proceed. She spoke with the people at her table, who were friends of friends, and who had been placed near the kitchen because the seating arrangement was an afterthought. She was gracious and present and interested, because she was always interested in people, which had nothing to do with Derek Holt. The crisis, when it came from Derek himself. He crossed the room at 7:45 with the specific walk of a man who has rehearsed this and believes rehearsal makes a thing reliable. He stopped at the edge of her table. "Lena," he said, "I'm glad you came." She looked up at him. She looked at him the way she had been unable to look at him for the last year of their marriage, directly, without the film of hope over it. "Are you?" she said. He glanced at Dominic. His face did the calculation again. "I heard you've been doing well." "I have," she said. "Very good." A pause that was meant to feel magnanimous and landed as what it was. "I always hoped you'd land on your feet." The table had gone quiet. Lena set her glass down. "Derek," she said, "I want to be honest with you about something." He waited with the expression of a man who expects to be told something minor. "I know about the building on West 46th, she said. "I know about Holt Meridian Holdings and Sentinel Property Partners and Gerald Voss. I know about the clause your lawyer filed yesterday, and I know about the email." She paused. "The one that says she won't renew." His face changed. Pause. "I don't know what you bought the building to push me out of my lease," she said, in the clear, quiet voice she used when she meant every word. "Not because my business is in it, because my business is succeeding, and that was something you were not prepared for." She looked at him steadily. "You invited me tonight for the same reason. You wanted to see me arrive at this party and feel small. You wanted to see me diminished." She let that sit for one moment. "You miscalculated." Again, the table was very still. Several people from adjacent tables had turned. Derek said nothing. "I came here tonight," Lena said, standing, so that she was the one looking down, "because my daughter told me I was going to win, and she is never wrong." She picked up her evening bag. "The full Sentinel filing goes to the DA's office and the business press Monday morning. Your lawyer will be hearing from Sandra Osei sometime before then." Pause. She looked at him for the last time, at the man who had called her fine, who had sat in a divorce attorney's office with his prepared speech about what she had never been, who had bought a building to end something she had built with her own hands. "I don't need your party, Derek," she said. "I never needed your version of who I was. and the people in 7 buildings across this city who are going to get their leases back on. Monday didn't need it either. She turned to Dominic. He stood. She walked out of the ballroom, and he walked with her, and she did not look back. Behind them, a very specific kind of silence was forming. The silence of a room that has witnessed something it will be discussing for a long time. Gerald Voss, at the head table, had gone the color of someone who has just understood that the evening is no longer proceeding on the timeline he arranged. Serena Voss was looking at her father. Derek Holt was standing at the edge of Lena's table with his glass in his hand, and the expression of a man who had planned something very carefully and watched it perform flawlessly in the wrong direction entirely. You have come this far, and that means everything to us. Stories like Lena's survive because people like you carry them forward. If this story moved you, if it stirred something real inside you, this is the moment to act on it. Subscribe so you never miss what comes next. Like this video to let us know it mattered. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment and tell us what part hit you hardest. Now, let's see this all the way to the end. The filing went out Monday morning at 9 a.m. Sandra Osei sent it simultaneously to the Manhattan DA's office, the city's Department of Investigation, and 7 tenant groups across the buildings affected by the Sentinel pattern. At 9:15, Priya sent the documentation package to 3 business journalists who covered New York real estate. At 9:30, Marcus Webb filed the tortious interference action on behalf of Elevation Events. By noon, the story was running. The headline in the first piece was, Sentinel Property Partners, a pattern of targeted displacement across 7 Manhattan buildings. The piece ran with a photograph of Paul Drummond and a sidebar that laid out every transaction in Sentinel's 6-year history. Gerald Voss was named. Holt Meridian Holdings was named. The email, she won't renew, was quoted in full. Serena Voss released a statement that afternoon, drafted in the careful language of someone who has been advised to separate herself from her father's business dealings as rapidly and visibly as possible. The statement was thorough, and her publicist was good, but the timing told its own story. The engagement was dissolved 5 days later. Derek Holt's company issued no statement. His lawyer filed a withdrawal of the lease restructuring action the morning after the story broke, before Sandra had to contest it. Derek himself did not call or write. He did not need to. She had said everything that needed to be said at the table in the Grand Meridian ballroom, and she had no further use for the conversation. Gerald Voss was served with a civil action 2 weeks after the filing. The DA's office opened a formal investigation. 3 of the 7 tenant groups filed their own actions. Paul Drummond testified. The nonprofit on the 2nd floor of the West 46th Street building, the job training program, received a pro bono legal commitment from Marcus Webb's firm to see their lease renewal through at no increase in rate. The tutoring center on the 5th floor received the same. The small architecture firm on the 3rd sent Lena a card. She put it on the wall of her office, above the mood board for the Reyes Foundation Gala. The gala itself was held in November, in a venue that Lena had chosen for the way light moved through it in the evening, the specific quality of warmth that makes people feel, without quite knowing why, that they are exactly where they should be. It raised $4.2 million for the Foundation's scholarship program and community health clinic, which was $2 million more than the previous year. Eleanor Reyes found Lena at the edge of the room when the program had ended and the music had started, and the room was doing the best thing a well-run event does, which is sustain itself, requiring nothing more from the people who built it. Well done, Eleanor said. Thank you, Lena said, for what you told me about sunlight. Eleanor looked around the room. My sister would have loved this, she said, about her own mother, the one whose name was on the scholarship. Then she looked at Lena with the direct attention of a woman who does not soften things unnecessarily. He told you he wanted to meet your children. He has, Lena said. And Cleo approved him on the 2nd visit, which is faster than I expected. Cleo has good instincts, Eleanor said, without having met Cleo, which told Lena something about Eleanor. They married the following September, exactly 1 year after the engagement party at the Grand Meridian, in a ceremony held on the roof garden of the Reyes Foundation building in the South Temrates, which had been there for 15 years, and which smelled of late summer flowers and the particular warmth of brick that has held heat all day and releases it slowly into the evening. 12 people. Priya, who was best woman and who cried once, briefly, and then pulled herself together and made a speech that was funny and true in equal measure. Sandra Osei, who shook Lena's hand before the ceremony and said, 4 years of good decisions, and this is the best one, which Lena was fairly sure was the warmest thing Sandra had ever said to anyone. Eleanor, who arrived in a hat and sat in the front row and looked at the roof garden with the satisfaction of someone who has watched this particular building become exactly what it was supposed to be. Lena's mother, who had brought her organizational instincts and her very specific smile and a dish of her congee, because she had decided that a wedding required at least one thing that tasted like home. The triplets, who were 4 years old and had been permitted to choose their own outfits, which Ava had done formally, Noah had done experimentally, and Cleo had done with absolute conviction. The ceremony was short and honest. Lena said, I spent 4 years building something I was told I couldn't build. I did it because my children were watching, and I needed them to see what it looks like when a person refuses to accept the story someone else wrote for them. You showed up while I was doing it, and you didn't ask me to slow down. You asked to help carry it. That's the only kind of beside me I ever wanted. Dominic said, I have been in rooms all over the world with people who have more than almost anyone. The one thing I have never found easily is someone who knows what matters. You know what matters. I have known it since the first 40 seconds. I would have stayed even if it had cost me everything. It cost me nothing. It gave me everything. His voice, at that last part, was not entirely steady. Eleanor, in the front row, pressed her hand flat against her knee the way she did when something was correct. After the ceremony, when the evening had settled in and the city glittered beyond the rooftop edge, Lena stood at the wall of the garden and looked south, in the direction of Park Avenue, and thought about a cream-colored invitation and the 45 seconds she had spent deciding what to do with it. She thought about Fine. She thought about what Fine had become. Dominic came to stand beside her. The triplets were with his aunt at the other end of the roof, Cleo apparently delivering her assessment of the evening to Eleanor, who was listening with complete attention. What are you thinking? He said. That it's a long way from that kitchen window, she said. He looked where she was looking. Yes, he said. The brick wall and the gray light. Did you hate it? No, she said. I needed it. For a while. She looked at the city. It showed me what I could do when nothing around me was making it easy. He reached over and took her hand. She let him. 3 years later, in the kitchen of the house they had bought in Brooklyn, a brownstone, 3 floors, with a garden that the triplets had already begun to colonize with varying degrees of coordination, Lena was making breakfast on a Saturday morning when she heard the particular sound of Cleo coming downstairs alone. The triplets were 7. Ava could be heard through the ceiling, talking to herself in the way she did when she was working something out. Noah's room was quiet, which meant he was still asleep, which would remain true until approximately 10 o'clock unless someone intervened. Cleo came into the kitchen and climbed onto the counter stool and looked at her mother with the dark, direct gaze she had been deploying since she was old enough to focus. Mama, she said. Morning, love. Tell me about the party. She